Welcome to Cambridge in October. Yesterday I took down the last of the shading material that covers the east-facing side of the greenhouse because it catches the really strong early morning sunshine. It's always a bit difficult at the ends of the season because the weather changes so much, and if you're not careful, you can end up with scorched leaves on the orchids that have previously been shaded all summer. So what I do is, at first, I take down the main screen that is on this wall, just right next to me, and then I take down the higher up one, which means that the sunlight can sort of shaft in here in the mornings. There is actually still a little bit of delicate sort of shading wash on the outside of the glass, and I'm going to leave that for another week or so still, just to protect the orchids that are on this end of the greenhouse. Over the years I've built up quite a big collection of orchids that are beautifully scented, and I wanted to show you, to start with, one of the newest recruits that I've got to my collection, and that's Coelogyne Tomentosa. A lot of people know this as Coelogyne massangeana. They come from a big area in Southeast Asia, from around just over 1,000 metres altitude, way up to over 2,000 metres. So it's cool to cold growing, and it's a brilliant orchid. I've had this since late spring, and it has produced, must be over a dozen flower spikes intermittently throughout the summer. As soon as one flower spike has finished, another one has started appearing to produce sometimes one, and in this case, at the end of the season, the last two spikes both together. They're very beautiful pendant, which means that they really need to be grown in a hanging basket. And as they develop, sometimes you have to just sort of give them a bit of a helping hand in amongst the pseudo bulbs. And it has a really lovely, delicate, sweet, not a heavy scent, a sort of light scent, which on a warm day, and it's reasonably good temperature in here today, it smells delicious. It doesn't always smell quite as good as that. Occasionally it takes on a slightly sort of off scent, but most of the time it's really a delightful orchid to have. You can see it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, I think it was, I counted 5 new growths. It's an incredibly vigorous and easy growing orchid, and I shall have to repot this before too long, and I'm sure that you need to divide them quite frequently every year or two, because otherwise they would form an absolutely huge specimen. The other thing I wanted to say was that the flowers last about 2 weeks, so they're quite long lasting. This version has flowers that come out a sort of pale creamy colour and then fade to a slightly off-white, which is very beautiful with the brown markings. And some variations have much more yellowy flowers. Both are equally attractive, so I'd highly recommend this orchid. And one of the other scented orchids that I've got in flower at the moment is this Cattleya Margaret Stewart, which is a really quite old hybrid with Cattleya Bow in its background. You can see that from the shape of the flowers. It's much more Bow-like than some of its other parents. It has a lovely, really quite strong perfume, slightly sort of lemony. It's flowering for me now. This is nearly the middle of October, but it flowers intermittently over the summer. Each time a new growth matures, it produces a flower at the top. Now, this isn't a magnificent specimen. I would be the first to admit. And that's because in here I'm growing things like coelogynes, dendrocaelums, orchids that really like cool, fairly shady conditions. And for many years I didn't even consider growing Cattleyas because they really want much higher light levels. In the summer they appreciate the extra warmth. Anyway, a friend of mine gave me some Cattleyas a couple of years ago, and one of the interesting things is that by growing my Cattleyas fairly high up, where they have the extra warmth and the light, it means that although they don't by any means thrive, they do quite well, and it means that I can grow Cattleyas alongside orchids that really prefer different conditions. Anyway, so this one is flowering now. This will be the last flower that this season, but it's about the third set of flowers that I've had this year. And in the summer, when it produces flowers and it's really quite warm, so sunny morning, the scent in here is really delicious. At the moment, because it's not as warm as it would be in the middle of summer, it doesn't smell as much, but it's well worth having, and the pristine white flowers are really lovely. The other difficulty, of course, is unless you have a very big glass house, most of the Cattleyas are really quite large plants, and if they do well, they quickly form a large specimen. In my case, I find that Laelias are probably a much better bet because they have equally beautiful flowers. This is Laelia, dayana, cerulea. I acquired this last year, so I've had it for about 18 months, and this, for me, is the first flowering. You can see it's still quite a small plant. I have it growing in a little basket. It's growing quite high up, so like the Cattleyas that I was just talking about, it gets the extra heat and extra light. It has a very faint smell, but I don't think anybody would say that they grow it for that reason. But the little Laelias, and I've got another one up there which is unfortunately not in flower yet, so I can't film it today. Maybe I'll film it a bit later in the month because it'll be out probably in another week or so. Anyway, I've collected quite a small collection of Laelias and Laelia Cattleyas, which is a hybrid between Laelias and Cattleyas, which in many cases possess the same quite compact, beautiful growth habit, beautiful flowers, and in many cases a scent too. It's rather unfortunate that I didn't film this a week or two ago because it's been out 2 or 3 weeks already. This is Cattleya Bow Bells, very famous hybrid that came from America in the 1940s. As you can see, it's quite large, and that is the problem that I have with Cattleyas. The flowers are undoubtedly very beautiful. Unfortunately, you could just see that they're going over now. But when they first come out, they're just so pristine and beautiful, and as if the sun in the morning, they sort of almost glisten. Now, Bow Bells, if you look on the internet, is purported to have a very good scent. And on a few mornings, when it's been warmer than normal, I have detected quite a pleasant, reasonable scent, but nothing that I would really comment on as being really worthwhile. And that's one of the problems, I think, because you can have Cattleyas that flower all through the year. And this hybrid, which is due to its parentage, flowers normally at the end of the season, sort of autumn. By this time of the year, in my case, I haven't really got the temperatures that bring out the scent that the flowers might have. So I think in future I'm going to be more careful when I'm choosing the Cattleyas that I grow to choose those that flower in the summer when the weather is more conducive to producing their scent. Although of course it is lovely having Cattleya flowers during the winter. Now, I didn't quite manage to finish filming what I wanted to include yesterday. So this morning, it's a lovely sunny morning, and the coelogyne that I was filming yesterday is smelling beautiful. But the one that I wanted to include and finish up with on this video is Proseccia garciana. It's also sold as Encyclia garciana, and now Anacheilium garcianum. So that's 3 possible names, which is a bit confusing. I would include this most definitely in my top 10 for orchids for scent, because it has a really lovely sort of vanilla-y, spicy, rich scent. Not one that would fill the whole sort of greenhouse, but as soon as you get anywhere near it, it's really, really marvellous. It comes from around 1,000 metres in South America, Venezuela, I think. So it's sort of cool to intermediate growing. It's quite easy to grow. It's quite compact. As you can see, this is just the first flower that's come out now, but there are, I think, 7 spikes altogether from the tops of the new growths that have grown this year. And each flower spike has pairs of flowers which come out one after the other. Now, apart from having a fantastic scent, it's a compact plant, free flowering, and the flowers, and this is the most amazing bit, they last 4, 5, 6 weeks. So exceptionally good value for money. I think it's an absolutely marvellous orchid to grow, so that's why I wanted to include it this month. If I do some filming later in the month and there are more flowers out, I'll have another look at it because it's really worthwhile. Anyway, thank you for watching this video and hope to see you in the next one.